I'm Kevin Gosztola. I'm with Firedoglake.com. I'm a reporter who has been covering the Bradley Manning proceedings every single day that there has been some kind of proceedings in his court-martial.
So tell us how you got involved. What was the one thing that got you started in all this to cover the Bradley Manning case that you do extensively so much?
As a writer, I was writing about the releases that Wikileaks, what they were publishing, the diplomatic cables, the war logs from Iraq and Afghanistan, even the collateral murder video that was released, and today is that anniversary of that release 3 years ago. The world got to see what is a war crime, the killing of journalists from Reuters, and also the firing on two children in the van, and then killing their father, who was coming there to try and save people who were wounded. And after doing this coverage, I was an intern for The Nation magazine, and then I went on to get a job working with Firedoglake, and I knew that I needed to be going to Fort Meade to cover, because it was I guess you could call it unfinished business. Just the fact that I had started to cover WikiLeaks and was gaining some recognition for covering WikiLeaks and anything related, whether it was the HB Gary hack, when we found out that they had developed this plan to go after WikiLeaks, whether it was these different things with the government having this investigation into Brigida, Roy Gungrape, and Jacob Applebaum to subpoena their Twitter information so that they could use this to go on some fishing expedition after anybody associated with WikiLeaks. I was following the Quantico treatment. I knew that Manning had a friend named David House who was on the visitors list, and he himself had been stopped at the border and had his laptop seized, and was now fighting the government and being persecuted. And they took the support network mailing list and were going to use that information for their investigation. So I just knew that I had to go and continue on and go to his court-martial.
So for anybody who hasn't known about Bradley Manning or who's watching it now and maybe curious about it, what's different compared with his case? Why is it so important for people out there to cover that, to see it's just not just another person releasing documents or anything like that? And what one thing you could pinpoint that makes it so important for people to support him?
Well, it's very powerful if the government can say Bradley Manning dumped a bunch of documents, he was reckless, he had no business letting us know what the information was that he ended up releasing. And I think that by paying attention to the case and wanting to know what is going on and taking an interest, you're challenging this government who wants us to ignore the prosecution, because every step of the way, when the public has been outraged or taken interest, there has been victory for Bradley Manning in his case, particularly with the Quantico confinement, of being in this facility, subjected to conditions of solitary confinement, and having this situation where he needed to be put into better conditions, and finally being moved to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas after being in jail there for 9 months. And that was a result of people being outraged and protesting. And that was a big victory that his defense has acknowledged publicly. The media, when they were covering that, when there was a lot of coverage, wall-to-wall coverage of how he was being treated, that was very beneficial. So the same goes here. The more people are interested, the more they're discussing, the more they're letting people know that this is what is happening with the soldier, and question. I would encourage people to just question, because it's pretty easy to unravel a lot of the arguments they're making about Bradley Manning. The only thing he did that you can prove that he did is disobey military codes that some could argue, made an oath or took an oath to follow. But then he was inside this intelligence facility and was given access that you and I and others don't have. And we were able to see the machine. We're able to see inside our system and tell what exactly the government was concealing. And that's what people need to understand. He was able to see what our government doesn't want us to know about the Iraq War. And so he made a decision that it was better if the world was able to tell some of these details about the Iraq War, if they were able to see what we're doing behind closed doors diplomatically, what goes on a daily basis. And he believes in open diplomacy. Actually, he said it himself, that if governments were more forthright about what they expect from each other, we would have less conflict, perhaps less war, less killing, and that would be beneficial. So there's very good idealistic reasons why you would want the public and why you would engage in the act that he engaged in. And I think that's something that people really need to consider.
Another good part of that is because it's not just one person. Also, like Lex O'Brien and you mentioned in the panel as well, that it's the idea of journalism covering these stories, that the press as a fourth of state of democracy covering the transparency in government, that is being shattered with Bradley Manning as well. That it's not just about him; it's about the press and how the press covers government secrets. And I think you mentioned about national security issues and all that stuff. You could get into that a little bit.
As I said during the panel tonight, I feel as if our press is making a decision that they are not supposed to be making. The government, I conceded, if they want to, they can say, this is in our national security interest, this is not in our national security interest. And they're going to do that, and we should expect it. But our press has an absolute right to publish. And people need to understand that, for example, a man now who's is much older, but James Goodall, who was the counsel to the New York Times and went there and argued in court when Richard Nixon was trying to prevent it, that they could publish the Pentagon papers that Daniel Ellsberg gave to them. He was defending the absolute right to publish that you have. And there are only, like, in his mind, he could only think of one circumstance, really, that you wouldn't maybe publish information, you could get in trouble. And that was if you knew information about a hydrogen bomb that was about to be dropped. And maybe you got involved in that. And maybe there was a reason that it should be dropped. And this was his rationale. All other reasons, maybe a military code for some sort of equipment. But other than that, everything else should be published. But we have a media, we have the New York Times, the Washington Post. We have these major outlets like CNN that have correspondents in the Pentagon tapped into the machine getting plants or pleaks, which is a combination of plants and leaks. And they don't want to lose that. And so what they do is they make these calculations. So to quickly go through 3 examples, we now have this person at the CIA who is understood to be in the clandestine service position and being considered by CIA Director John Brennan. And she is said to have been involved in signing off on the destruction of the torture tapes at a CIA black site. These would have been tapes of Abu Zubaydah being waterboarded and Nashiri, who is the alleged USS Cole bomber. We should know about her name. We should know who this person is, and we should be shaming that person as much as we shamed Jose Rodriguez when he talks about his defense of torture. We also, there's another example recently in the past year with the Saudi drone base, a secret drone base being revealed. The government wanted the media to keep this from the public, so they agreed. They said, we're not going to write about this. We're not going to investigate it. We're not going to ask questions about why a drone base is in Saudi Arabia and what that would mean. I mean, the killing that could happen, the blowback that could happen here in the United States. And then there's also the other example of Raymond Davis, who was found to be working for the CIA, had shot people in Pakistan, and they were not going to say that he was with the CIA. So these are calculations that are being made, and it's a context for the Bradley Manning case. It doesn't really explain everything that's going on in Bradley Manning's court-martial. It doesn't excuse or vindicate Bradley Manning necessarily, but it allows people to understand the way that things work so that they can have, I think, form a better view of what Bradley Manning's case means.
So just to wrap it up here, where people could find your work covering the recent Bradley Manning case, the recent updates on that, so they could continue along with other journalists who are covering it as well, and all of your stellar work and all that. So tell people where you could find your stuff.
Yeah, so go to firedoglake.com, and that's firedoglake.com, and alexaobrien.com. Alexa is this journalist who has been doing what she can to create a public record of the proceedings, because she and I are both on this lawsuit trying to get access to the court records, and we don't have access. So when the judge reads rulings, we have to scramble to keep up with her, and she reads about 180 words per minute. So when you have a ruling that takes about an hour and a half to read, I'm just going to admit that the public isn't getting all the details that they might want about what's happening with Bradley Manning, because we can't keep up. And some people don't understand the process, so they're not able to understand what is being said to them in that ruling. And then I would recommend that people go to another organization that I have covered myself, that I really respect, the PressFreedomFoundation.org. They are this group of individuals that have come together to not only make it possible for Wikileaks to continue to receive donations because there's this blockade that prevents them from being supported, but they're also bringing in other organizations that deserve support, like the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, that has done tremendous work on drones, and like muckrock.com, which is a great operation for forcing the government to give us some information, if any, through Freedom of Information Act requests. So I really encourage people to check out those websites.
Member of Parliament in Iceland, and I co-produced the Collateral Murder video, and I was a spokesperson for a while for WikiLeaks. I have finally come to the United States, and I was allowed to come, which is very pleasing.
His portion about collateral murder is particularly poignant for me, because you can tell by what he says and how he describes, the seeming bloodlust of these pilots. It really affected him. In fact, in court, his voice changed a bit.